We're joined now by Senior Advisor for National Security and Foreign Policy, Rick Grenell. Rick, welcome back to the show. But I wanted to first talk about, we were going to bring this up earlier this week, but as you were coming on the air, the breaking news happened that Governor Cuomo of New York was stepping down, was resigning. So that kind of, moved everything as we had to cover the breaking news. But you just got back from the Balkans. There's a story up or a blog up on ACLJ.org. I think we've got to give people a bigger picture here of why you were there, and let's get into it.
Yeah, look, I encourage everybody to go to ACLJ.org and look up this piece. I did, as you say, spend the last 11 days in the Balkans, and I was really able to hear from the people and from the leaders, and it's quite clear that they miss U.S. leadership. If you remember that the Trump administration had negotiated a historic agreement, 4 historic agreements that were really moving the region towards economic normalization. And we put in the last negotiation agreement a 1-year reprieve on both sides fighting to de-recognize each other. And the way that this goes is that the Serbs try to get other countries to not recognize Kosovo. Kosovo, in turn, tries to go to other countries, and they're doing a recognition campaign. This recognition and de-recognition campaign is really causing a lot of problems because it means they're fighting and not trying to move forward with some sort of agreement. And so we got a 1-year reprieve. That 1-year hold to not recognize or seek recognition or de-recognition runs out on September 4th. So we're looking at dialing back this whole progress after September 4th, simply because the Biden team hasn't paid attention, hasn't been able to negotiate with either side. They've turned it over to the Europeans and no progress has been made. We're about to go backwards on September 4th. And I think what we'll see is a recognition and de-recognition campaign on both sides that immediately inflames the progress that we had been moving towards.
Sure.
And Rick, I remember when you were in the White House announcing a lot of these measures were moving forward, and the historic nature of it, and some of the press just wanted to get into petty Washington politics instead of focusing on the truly historic nature of what this does. But do you think that now, because of the Biden administration's lack of interest or turning it over to the Europeans, it's just a continuation of that political gamesmanship by the administration of not wanting to give what is a truly historic victory for the world and for the region, another win for the Trump administration by carrying on the legacy?
Yeah, it's such a great question because, look, I think that if you're an Albanian American, a Serbian American, a Croatian American, anywhere in the Balkans, I think you've got to be really upset at the Biden administration missing out for the last 6-7 months, doing nothing to further this opening. And remember that it was Donald Trump's team that decided to go for the economic normalization, not the political dialogue. We had spent 20 years kind of sitting at the table trying to talk about political issues going nowhere. And we suddenly made historic progress for agreements once we just concentrated on the economic aspect. But I think your point is right in that the Biden team is disinterested. The media certainly in Washington, as you pointed out, when I went to brief on the issue, it was so sad. So many reporters, they had no idea where the Balkans were. They didn't know the history. They didn't understand the issue. They literally just wanted to talk about politics. And I think that's indicative of the problem we see in Washington. The hard issues, the black and white discussions are the only things that they understand. The hard issues, the gray area, are largely dismissed.
Yeah, they probably don't even want to read 2 pages to see really what these stories are, what's going on. And I mean, that's why we at the ACLJ even have people like you, Rick, and writing these great stories and blogs, if you will, on our website, because you need to be informed of what's happening all around the world, and because all of this is can be very helpful or hurtful to you as an American citizen as well. But I know, Wes, you had something.
Yeah, well, one of the things I think is so significant that you pointed out, Rick, that this neglecting what's going on over there where you were is a reaction by the Biden administration to the Trump administration. Instead of taking action on behalf of U.S. strategic interest or on behalf of the American people, those kinds of things, rather than an action like that, it is a reaction against a former president. And it's not just the Balkans. You look at the Keystone Pipeline that was canceled, and yet they allowed the Russians to complete their pipeline. You look at the reversal in border policies and the crisis on the border, tax cuts for corporations to bring companies back to America. The list goes on of things that the Biden administration either reversed or neglects simply as a reaction against the Trump administration.
Yeah, and look, let me really boil it down for Americans who are listening to us right now and saying, why should I care, or so what? A couple of points. One, there are 600 plus Americans, mostly from Iowa, that serve in Kosovo in the NATO force. And that is American dollars, American men and women who go and serve to try to figure out how to keep peace. Now, after 20 years, the Trump administration's position on the Balkans was, we haven't seen military fighting, so let's try to move beyond this perceived conflict and let's try to do economic development. If you can do economic development, then you can bring our troops home, and you don't have to add additional troops. We're looking at what's going on in Afghanistan, right, where the Taliban is now taking over. Right. This is a completely failed state. But if you look at areas like the Balkans and you bring in Western investment and you bring in American companies, you suddenly move beyond just a perceived conflict into growth, economic development, which benefit Americans because the area is safer, and American ingenuity, American jobs are created because you partner with those in the Balkans. And so it's a really win-win long-term. Again, the hard work that needs to be done, it's not always sexy, it's not always a crisis, but these are the types of initiatives that need to be done, that administrations need to work on. And sadly, the Biden strategy was to turn this over to the Europeans, and what we know about Brussels, the capital for the EU, it's a disaster. They're going to just talk, and they're not going to make any progress.
One thing I'm going to do, Rick, because it feels like in talking to you is one of the main things that just regular Americans who are watching this, who want to get educated, obviously they can go read the blogs, they can go read about what's going on, but is to also share this content with people and really start to grow this, get attention, get eyeballs on what's happening all around the world and how it affects you. I'm going to actually tell our digital team right now to clip this out, make this a specific segment that we can release that people can share later in the day or later in the week to make sure that really they're, like you said, a lot of people just don't even see why this is important. But to get eyeballs on it is probably, we can do things legally, but also as an American citizen, you can use your social media powers and however it is to share and make sure people even know about what's happening in these regions.
It's such a great idea, because when I was just in the Balkans and spent time in Serbia and Albania, I heard constantly from people a very big concern about what's going on in the United States. They're watching us, and they're making sure that they stay up to date on every detail in our political system. And they're very concerned about the wokeness that's arising in the United States. And mainly because this area has seen its fair share of fascist leaders. And so they know what it's like when the media begins to work for the ruling party. And they're seeing that in the United States. They're seeing our media working for the ruling party and not holding the ruling party to account. And when the Balkan leaders are beginning to notice what's going on in America and what's going on in Washington, D.C., we have trouble. So I urge everyone to share this and to speak up and to make your frustration known that Washington, D.C. is broken.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick, for joining us today and discussing these important topics that, look, sadly, you're probably not hearing about anywhere else. Because these are the type of topics that administrations in the news, like you said, they don't find fun, or they want to silence, they want to keep it down. They don't want you really to know about these major international, because as you said, could turn into crises if we're not careful, that is happening around the world. So thank you, Rick, for always keeping our audience informed.